Lauren, thank
Yeah,
you so much for being here today.
yeah, my
I
pleasure.
really enjoyed our conversations about your relationship with land and education, uh, intentional stewardship, perspective that you hold and govern your life by. And so I couldn't think of a better person to kick off the regenerative way, which is really just the hope of bringing forward conversations with people that have built an intentional relationship with the natural worlds to help kind of fill in some of those gaps that exist with people that, like myself, didn't grow up with it, and I'm seeking to find it and to equip my family with it and future generations to come. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here. Yeah, I was thinking if you're okay with just giving a bit of a background as to who you are and some of the roles that you've held up until this point, and then some of the work that maybe you do with Howl, just at a high level.
Sure, sure. Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation. So, know that everything is a journey. I'm not done with my journey. I continue to learn on a regular basis. I just like being invited to have a conversation. Um, Part of what we do with this regeneration and this learning on the land is just having an opportunity to share. And in that sharing, quite often, there's a certain amount of giving, but there's also a certain amount of receiving because everybody has something to offer to that conversation. So also know that this wasn't always my background. I was born and raised in Calgary. Um, I grew up in the nice heavy winters of Calgary, and my mom and dad still live in the same house that I was born in.
Oh, wow.
Um, so we have a really connection to this area, and to the Rocky Mountains and to the prairies. And I have grandparents that had a farm up in Edmonton. So I got time to spend time in the prairies up by Edmonton. But I had grandparents that lived on Vancouver Island and in Vancouver. So I got that experience with the ocean. So as I grew up as a kid, I had opportunities to spend time in places that weren't always just home. I got a little bit of chance to travel. My mom and dad were good at taking us for places and those kind of things. But I have one younger brother. We're really exposed to lots of athletics. Both of us played baseball to a high level. We played hockey in the winter times outdoors because there was no indoor rinks when I was a kid. Everything that we did was outdoors. My dad used to flood the ice, and that was the ice that we used to use. So we were always very active. Um, Lots of lessons learned in just being active and working with others. Came out of high school in Calgary, graduated from Beaverbrook, and went to University of Calgary for 10 years. Did 2 degrees, Bachelor of Science in Zoology and a BA in International Politics. Didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Big adventures. While I was doing that education, I had done cadets as a kid. So I had a glider pilot's license. I had a private pilot's license, so I could actually fly before I could go to school, or before I could drive. I got a chance to travel, see a little bit of the world through some exchange. And then as I was going through university, I was part of the Canadian Forces as a medic. I got a chance to learn some life lessons that way that still stick with me today. A lot about responsibility and honor, the ability to work with others in situations that are both stable and unstable. And I got a chance to compete at a high level in international pentathlon through the military. So again, a different way of being active. I got a chance to orienteer, learn how to run through the woods really fast, and how to map and compass. So again, skills that ultimately later on in life would probably come to bear on some of the things that I'm doing now. Finished with a teacher's certificate from the University of Calgary, and then got into teaching. So I taught in Canmore for 20 years at the high school, pretty much taught biology for most of that time, and then ended up coming back to Calgary to teach at a new high school in Calgary, and it shifted the journey. As opposed to more of an academic straight biology, which I loved. The kids that I taught and going to connection and regeneration, the kids that I taught in Canmore, I found were pretty connected to their area. They lived in that alpine region. A lot of them were skiers. A lot of them, their mom and dad grew up on the land, going for hikes, working with wildlife. They lived in such a wild, natural space that their connection to it was very palpable. I moved back to Calgary, back to the big city to teach at a new high school, and immediately knew that a lot of the students that I was working with, very disconnected to the land. Not that they didn't know things about it, but there was no genuine, they didn't feel like they were walking on the land on a regular basis. They're living in a big city. And there are people that don't get out of their neighborhoods in a big city. So the journey really changed there. That gives you a little bit of the where I came from to this. And then some of the experiences. I was always invited to go out for hikes, and I was always invited to go out. So I was active, but up to that point in Canmore, enjoying the beauty and going for some hikes myself, I wasn't necessarily teaching it in a classroom setting. It was more academic. And as you learn a little bit more, one of the things that I'm finding out about now is the kind of the two-eyed seeing model of things, that there's different ways of talking about things that everybody's experiencing at the same time. That wasn't something necessarily that I was doing in Canmore, but became a big part of some of the things that are happening now. So most importantly, I think, would be that shift. When I was moved out of Canmore, beautiful classroom, kids were amazing, community was awesome. Coming back to Calgary, the reason that I was hired at this school was to develop a new program that didn't exist. They said, the only reason we're hiring you is we have this space. It's called the Environmental Science Room, which by itself, just having that name, I found very prescriptive. It sounded like a science class. So if you're going to take this option, it was going to be a science option. And I didn't necessarily think that that's what kids needed. So I decided to create what I called the natural science program. The whole idea, base bones, was to reconnect high school kids to the natural world. That was it. So I was reading books back then like Last Child in the Woods, and looking at things like nature deficit. Okay, so this just fact that people were not exposed to enough nature to even have any kind of a connection with it at all. And then I was doing some work, John Young's book, The Coyote Guide to Reconnecting to the Natural World, gave me the tools. And between those two, they gave me purpose and they gave me tools. And then I had to look at what was available within the Alberta curriculum. And I wanted to create a journey for students. I wanted to create a class where they could come in and it wasn't prescriptive. What would you like to talk about today? What happened yesterday in the world that we could bring into a classroom today? So it wasn't so much based on a solid lesson plan of step A, B, C. It was more organic, project-based, so that kids could explore their passions as they discovered them. But yet at the end, they could get 5 credits. So they could get 5 credits to their high school diploma. It started as a grade 10 program, 5 credits. And credits typically I wanted to create a journey. So they were stewardship. So how kids could learn how to be active in environment and learn how to create some form of project that would allow them to move forward. Agriculture, so learning about the food and the way that food is grown in our country. Wildlife, so looking at the wildlife in our area and other areas. Forestry, we live next to one of the largest, most pristine forests left in the world with the boreal forest. And then the other credit varied depending on what I thought the interest was. So one day we did one on environmental ethics. So what's the morality? What's the things that you have to bring to bear when you start talking about the environment and the bigger pictures? So it started as a 5-credit program. I remember I had 10 students sign up for it for the first time. And we didn't know whether it was going to fly. And at the end of that semester, we had 60 kids show up at the office demanding that we have another program like this. At the end, I didn't have room for it in my program, so I ended up teaching a class after school for that first year. Since that time, we've been able to grow the program from a 5-credit offering in grade 10 right through to grade 12. So we now have a Natural Science 10, Natural Science 20, and a Natural Science 30 program. And each one of them builds on the journey that the students had in the year past, but isn't based on prerequisites. So if you didn't take it in grade 10 and you discover in grade 11 that you suddenly have a little bit of interest in what you're hearing about this natural science program, you could enter the grade 11 program with your friends and you weren't missing anything. So every journey was separate, but allowed you to join when you were ready. So if you never took natural science until grade 12, and that was when you were ready to jump into it, you could jump in and none of the credits were prerequisites. So we designed a journey that way, and it's now grown. Well, I retired after 30 years, and I've handed that program over. I was very lucky. I got to mentor a young gentleman into that program, and it's now 3 levels: grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12, but they are now running 8 blocks of that.
It's amazing.
So they have multiple blocks of grade 10, multiple blocks of grade 11, and multiple blocks. So I think we hit a note. We found that there was a deficit. We found a group of students who are willing to take that chance to learn a little bit more about the world and make the first steps at reconnecting, because I think that reconnection is really important given the world that's around us. We always say that this generation is the generation that's going to save us all from what's happened to our world, and I think that's really unfair. I think it's fair if that next generation is connected to the world around them, is walking on the land, is seeing the importance of the land, and can make those decisions themselves so they can enter that conversation.
Absolutely.
So that's a little snapshot up to that retiring after 30 years. Now, during that, I learned 3 things. I said, if you're going to connect kids to the natural world, you have to bring it into your classroom. So our classroom was full of plants. They grew their own plants. They looked after their own plants. They propagated their plants. They grew food in the classroom that they got to harvest. So the natural world was inside. And some of them took it to heart. I had a student build a desk for me. She said, we have all of this furniture. Why can't our furniture give back? So she built me a living desk. My desk in my classroom grows food. So it's the desk where I sit, but it's trellised, and I can grow food off the sides. I had an aquarium. It was a living desk. So it was giving back. I went, what a cool idea. Like a really inanimate object that you have figured out a way of making a connection from both. She got to work with a master woodworker. So where the wood was coming from, and turn it into something that gave back at the same time, as opposed to it just being a utilitarian object in your room.
Yeah.
That was the kind of impact on bringing nature in. We had a living wall that the kids maintained and watered and propagated and did. We had a greenhouse in the courtyard. We now have a perennial garden in the courtyard. We had a rooftop garden. So we had 40 elevated beds on the roof that we would grow food, and I would maintain it over the summer, and they would harvest in the fall. So we brought that natural world into a school, into a space, and kids thrived in that space. We had kids come to that space that didn't even take the program. They just came in because it smelled so good. And they were welcome to that space, because just because you take a program doesn't mean that everyone else is excluded for that. We welcomed everybody into that space that wanted to come up. With lots of things going on in that space. Then I said, you have to get the kids out. So every program was based on 3 field trips for sure. So they would have the opportunity to do a local trip within the city of Calgary, Fish Creek Park, a whole variety of different places, Nose Hill Park, there are lots of things. And we could couple that with people that would meet us on the land, take them into, so in grade 10, we tended to spend our time in Kananaskis, an area, and we would do a hike there. In grade 11, we would go more up into the Banff, Canmore, Lake Louise area. And then in grade 12, we would get up the Parkway and go up into Jasper, because I thought, what an experience through a program to have kids basically work the spine of the Rocky Mountains and see different areas and what's available there. And then we coupled with different organizations like Inside Education or CPAWS, and they ran programs for us. So in grade 10, we would run a water program in Yamnuska. In grade 11, we would do a grizzly bear program more towards the Turner Valley end of area of Kananaskis. And then in grade 12, they would do a program back up in Kananaskis that dealt more with climate change and climate action. And then we said the next step, so bring it in, take them out. Then the next was take them away. So this led to programs that we'll talk about a little bit later, but I did a marine biology program for many years out in Bamfield Marine Station on the coast to give them an idea. So Bamfield Marine Station is end of the road on the west side of Vancouver Island.
Okay.
If you drive out to Port Alberti, if you turn right, you end up in Ucluelet and Tofino. If you turn left, you follow a logging road that ends in Bamfield Inlet.
Wow.
And there's a university-run station there, and the kids get a 7-day marine biology experience. So they learn about a habitat that on the prairies. How much do you learn about the ocean on the prairies? And it changed lives. What it did is exposed kids to an ecosystem was out of their experience. challenged them in many ways. And I had many students come back saying that changed the trajectory of where I thought I was headed, because I found something that I found that I was passionate about now.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just marine biology. We did temperate rainforest ecology. We worked with elders and got to go down and look at one of the longhouses at there. So they got experience in many different things. And what it does, it set the hook for something that maybe they were not prepared for.
Yeah.
At the same time, part of my background is I had family when I was a kid. My aunt and my uncle lived in the Yukon. My uncle was a conservation officer up there. My aunt was quite the artist and did a whole bunch of things. But the North was pretty difficult place to visit in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the 90s. It wasn't an easy place necessarily to get to. But I think, like many experiences, I think some of these things set hooks in you that you don't know are there until you're at that point in your life where you're ready to explore them.
Yeah.
So a teaching colleague of mine was doing some work on Arctic sovereignty and introduced me to a gentleman named Mike Maloney, who introduced me to Harry Penn and Matthew Eyre, who were working for the Arctic Institute of North America. And the conversation was, is there anything that we can maybe do in the North? And working with these gentlemen, I found out that they have a research station in Kluane National Park called the Kluane Lake Research Station. And we started to talk about, what would be the chances of maybe taking a group of high school students to the North?
Yeah.
So the whole idea of taking them away. And people were looking west, east, and south for their trips. Go down to Yellowstone, go to the East Coast, go to the West Coast. And I'm like, nobody's talking about going north. And I said, maybe it's an opportunity to point our compass north. So I worked with those three gentlemen, and they were just blown away. They said, seriously, you want to bring students to the North? And I'm like, yeah, I think it would be great. So in, I have to remember which year, 2015, we started working on this. 2018, I convinced the Calgary Board of Education that they could take the chance that we could take a group up there. And we did our first inaugural trip with a group of students, 20 students, up to the Yukon. And we worked in Whitehorse, Haines Junction, Kluane Lake, Carcross. And we worked with a variety of different researchers. We met a variety of different elders from Champagne-Ajac and Kluane First Nation. And we built a program that changed lives. Holy cow. The walking in a place that was so different than where you come from opened conversations to reconnecting and really led to a focus on what we would now call that land-based learning. Like taking it out of the classroom, putting it in the voice of others, or putting it in the voice of just being on the land in a place that you are either being challenged or just being introduced to. The conversations from that group of students coming back, they were like, we had no idea what this was going to do to us, but we will never forget it.
Yeah.
The power of the land, the power of the people was able to reconnect them in a very different, meaningful way. And for the first time, really gave me an opportunity to see the power of what we now call two-eyed seeing. I was able to bring a lot of conversation from the very Western aspect of things, that science aspect, that proof-driven kind of, this is why things work the way they work. It was interesting to see, as I talked about that in one way, have an elder pick that conversation up immediately and speak to it in exactly the same way in a completely different way.
Absolutely.
And the kids got it. They were like, we've heard about this, but we're seeing this in real time. And then they're able to meld those, and their worldview has been changed.
Yeah. I think you touched on so many powerful pieces. Just thinking about like Kluane National Park and the research station. I remember when I was there, and the National Park sent one of their representatives to give a talk on bears. And there was so much fear around bears. There was so much respect, rightfully so, but definitely there was this anxiety that you could feel within the group as they were talking about, coexisting with grizzly bears. And if you're going to go down to the beach, always be with somebody, bear spray, all the rest. And then the day that I think was part of your programming and your relationship building with James Allen and his take on it, I could feel like my paradigm shift in real time. And I could see through that two-eyed seeing in real time it being challenged to the point where now I try and incorporate James's perspective as much as possible, and his, perspective of our people have lived within this land for time immemorial and lived amongst grizzly bears, and to fear them every single day is asinine. You shouldn't have that relationship with the land around you. So yeah, I think you touch on so many powerful pieces. One thing that I really wanted to circle back on was it seems like as a teacher, you've really brought a perspective of these land-based experiences and these transformative experiences, taking people outside of the norm and exposing them to these new communities, ecosystems, environmental problems, social problems, in entirely different context. Where for you do you draw that inspiration? Did you have an experience like that as a child where it just kind of shattered some of those paradigms and exposed you to a different version of yourself, almost like a rite of passage?
Yeah, again, I was very lucky. I had a family that supported a lot of experiences. I remember for sure 1984 was my first trip, grade 11, out to Bamfield Marine Station. That trip was really powerful in recentering what I thought I could do. Sometimes those times are just being in a place and being allowed some space to explore. Sometimes we put so many restrictions on things that, and restrictions are there for a reason. I mean, we want to keep people safe in a lot of ways, and safety's become preeminent in our modern society. 84, we were allowed to explore a little bit, and I can remember sitting on a bench, and this bench is still there. It's on Brady's Beach. And I had a book with me, and I was just allowed to sit on that bench for 2 hours and read my book and look at the ocean. And I think it was the first time for a while where I gave some thought to where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And I was doing some meaningful things at that time. But I think it opened up pathways where I went, there are lots of options. It's not prescriptive.
Yeah.
I think and at the same time, there were changes coming. I was in cadets. I was flying. I wanted to be a pilot. And I did aircrew selection, and I found out that my sight wasn't good enough. And what I had thought I was going to be for the rest of my life changed within a matter of hours. And suddenly I didn't know what I was going to do or be. I knew I had interests. I just didn't know how to pursue those interests. And it ultimately led to 10 years in university, trying to figure out where that was going. So that was another journey. But I also remember there was lots of lessons that I learned when I did an international exchange to Israel. I won an exchange through cadets. I went as a Canadian representative, one of 3, and traveled with a group of international students to Israel. And I traveled Israel from north to south to east to west. And I had a host in Ramat Gan in Tel Aviv, and he would take me out for walks on the beach. And his deal was to teach me things that he thought was really important as a young man that were going to be. So again, I was getting lessons from people who were amazing. And I mean, like I say, I've supported through this entire thing through my family. The lessons that I got from my family make me who I am today. But they also allowed me to learn through other experiences, through other people.
Yeah.
Again, that led me into the reserves and into being a medic, and then competing with pentathlon. And the lessons that I learned there opened my eyes up to things that I think are what I took foundationally as a teacher. Routine, some organization, some planning, but the ability to be able to take your targets and shift as they change with you. So these are all, I think, small experiences. I can't think of one moment that just completely changed everything. I think there were small moments along the way, and some people are looking for that big moment, and you'll have it.
Yeah.
Other people, I would say, they're going to be 10 moments, but stitch them together, and you put that together, it'll give you an idea of why your feet are where they are right now. Yeah. Sometimes it can be that big epiphany. I know people that have had that. I had this moment, and I've seen those moments on some of these trips that I've worked with young adults, both on the West Coast and up in the Yukon. I've seen that moment. I know that moment. They're having it right there. That's that moment where something just fell into place, or something that they thought was exactly the way it needed to be shifted. And it doesn't mean that it has to shift it so completely that it's not meaningful anymore. It shifts it in a direction where they feel more comfortable with that. And it becomes more of who they are. And they're figuring out who they are. We're figuring out who we are for our entire lives.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not done yet. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm still learning on a regular daily basis. And I'm learning from the people that I get to have conversations with. Like, I mean, you mentioned James Allen. The days I have spent with him, the days that I spent with Ron Chambers, another elder that we have the opportunity to work with in Haines Junction, and then Harold and Mita at Long Ago People's Place, Champaign-Azac, just outside of Whitehorse. I have been, I don't know whether there's another word other than blessed, to be able to work in the company of these people and learn. Every time I go up there, there's something else I can learn. And at the same time, I'm feeling that I'm able to give at the same time. It's not a one-way conversation. I find that those conversations are always two-way conversations. And I've grown as a person in those conversations. And people are always like, well, you're kind of getting older. Like, how much growing could there possibly be? And I said, I don't think it ever ends. I don't think it finishes. And a lot of that comes down to what they say about how you connect to where you are. At that, I think I'm learning more about who I am in the places that I am in the land that I'm on, as opposed to and some of the teaching doesn't come from our elders. Sometimes it's participants. I had one participant last year just literally teach me the difference between, a place and a space. And a lot of time we're focused on places. We can talk about the places we've been, and they're important, but places are just three-dimensional in space. Like they're just, that's it. He was definitely trying to make sure that I understood the difference when you get to a place. When you move to a place, it's a three-dimensional space that now you have imbued meaning to. And that to me was a big distinction between, we visit places, and that's great. And sometimes that's all they will ever be, is a space that we have gone to. When they become a place, you've imbued them with some form of meaning.
Yeah.
And when you can do that, you've made a different connection with where you are. Your feet were there and you made a connection, and none of those connections have to be the same. You could stand with a group of 20 and every single person makes a different connection to that space.
Yeah.
What it means to them as a place. When they talk about that now, they say, I visited space. The minute they go further and they talked about how that changed them or what it means to them, that's that reconnection.
Yeah.
And it can be just to that one, or it can be to multiple places. And I found that when we've taken people up to the Yukon, we've been able to really make shifts. And some of it has been the people that are participating and their conversations around a fire. Or it's that work that we do with elders and wisdom keepers, like Polly and JD, that we get a chance to work with. It's that walk along Kluane, and just her talking about her grandmother and her growing up in that area. What would be a space is immediately becoming a place, and you've been invited to join that journey.
Yeah.
Those people are incredibly important, and we need more of those opportunities. I think that whole land-based education conversation, and why I'm continuing it, and we'll talk about that, is the opportunity for people to have these conversations in a place that's outside of their comfort zone. So,
yeah. Do you feel like a couple of thoughts come to mind? One, it seems like right now we seem to live in a society where it's risk adverse. People don't like to walk into risk, but through that risk comes this transformative experience so often, as you kind of separate yourself from the norms that govern much of your life, and you step into a realm where you might not be the expert. Like, even hearing you talk about this lifelong learning perspective, that rings like a unique quality that you hold. There's almost like there's a vulnerability that I feel like you're expressing, where you're acknowledging that there's information or expertise out there that you're hoping to gain one day, but you're not there yet. and you never will be there, and you're acknowledging that you'll never be there. And so there's kind of two pieces there where I feel like that risk side gives you a glimpse into you're on that threshold. You might be looking to other expertise to help you navigate, going up the mountain, or help you navigate paddling or whatever it is. But there's also that other side where it's a humility that you're drawing from. Like, how do you see us instilling that in youth? How do we get to a place where people see the benefit for like risk and rites of passages, but also the benefit of these transformative experiences, and looking to others for that two-eyed seeing, acknowledging that they don't have all the answers?
Yeah, taking that first step.
Yeah.
Well, risk is a part of life, and the risk-averse aspect of things. I mean, you have to be willing to take a chance, but you have to be matching that with safety. So, I mean, you talked about grizzly bears. And when we were putting this program together with the Calgary board, one of the big things that they were concerned about was the fact that we were fairly isolated in an area where grizzly bears are an issue. So one of the big stepping stones to building a program that allowed us to take students was the safety aspect in a wildlife. So students prior to going on the program had to be bear aware. They had to be bear spray trained.
Yeah.
So some of that risk aversion comes with training. How do you get that training? How do you make that training available so people are willing to take that first step? And simply, believe it or not, quite often going on a hike in Kananaskis or out into Banff National Park is, do you know that you need bear spray with you? And do you know how to use it?
Yeah.
And it's incredible how many people want to take that step but don't know. And I love the fact that, and I'll say this, COVID did, as hard as COVID was on people, it did flick the switch on allowing people to want to get out of their houses to find a piece of nature because they were so tired of being isolated. It pushed a lot of people onto the land, which is great. Love it. They took that first step, but then I see a lot of people on these hikes that are unprepared for where they are. And you've seen this. They don't have bear spray. They don't have water. They have sandals on for a hike. Like, I get it, that desire to be out there. But our job as educators was, we want that's where we want you to be. But we also want you to have that ability to feel safe and to know that if something goes just a little bit sideways, you have that knowledge that's going to allow you to respond to that situation. You have enough water, you have enough food, you have that extra jacket to put on if the weather changes. You've been in the weather, it can change in 15 minutes. And if you don't have that wet weather gear, your hike is now changed to something else. So we spend a lot of time on that preparation. And to me, those are life skills.
Yeah.
I didn't have those when I was younger. I mean, I'd go on hikes and I was just as ill prepared as anybody else. But as I've learned that there's the opportunity to give those skills to other people so that they can pass them on. I love when kids that have participated in some of our programs come back to me and go, guess what? I took my friends on a hike. I'm like, seriously? And he's like, yeah, I taught them how to use and they were like, you could hear how they were now allowing people to also have that experience based on their knowledge. And then they would always have questions, do I know enough? And if the question is, well, put it this way, like, and you ask this, one of my favorite things in class was when kids would ask questions because you're the expert. I'm like, okay, yeah, I have some biological knowledge and I have some degrees and I have some life experience. But I would honestly, they would be gobsmacked sometimes where I go, yeah, I don't know. And then they're like, what? And you're the teacher. How can you possibly not know? And I'd be like, well, why should I? I said, I'm one person. I cannot know everything. I have a bank of knowledge which allows me to enter these conversations. But if you ask me a question and I'm uncomfortable with my knowledge on that, or I have none, I'm not going to play games. I'm going to tell you that I can't answer that question. But the challenge then becomes is, how do I find out? So in my classes, if I had a question asked to me that I didn't know, I would then spend my night, my wife, and again, my wife is amazing. She supported me through all of these adventures that I have. She could tell when I come home that a kid had asked a question because I would be going down the rabbit hole for hours because I needed to go up the next day and be able to impart some knowledge on that question. So I didn't know yesterday, but I've picked up a little bit of knowledge and this is what I now know to answer your question. And the minute you do that, there's a certain amount of respect that comes with that. One, you've validated that the question that they've asked was not unimportant.
Yeah.
And we do that quite often. So we get questions on the land. there are questions that I'm asked on the land where I go, I actually don't have an answer to that question. That's really good. But then the invitation is, can we find out together?
Yeah.
And sometimes that, luckily, and I find serendipity, one of my favorite words, is I might not know, but somebody on that group knows. So welcoming people in that have that expertise is an amazing way to bring other people to bear to that spotlight, to become the expert for that moment in time. And then everybody learns.
Yeah.
So those have been huge. And the fact that that's been able to continue, and it's lifelong. So, I mean, we always talk about lifelong learning. Okay. It's a catchphrase for a lot. It is true. Like, if you can open yourself up for the fact that you are going to be learning for the rest of your life, then when it comes to things that we offer, like land-based learning and some of the pillars, and we haven't talked about Howl yet. It's been a wonderful opportunity for me to be able to learn as an educator. 30 years in the classroom. That was one segment of my life. And now I've retired and I'm moving on to another segment of my life. And I'm as excited about that as I was 30 years. I'm finding feel like I'm reinventing myself to a little bit. Being in a classroom and being in an educational system comes with many pros and many cons. Consider myself lucky. I retired and still loved every moment in a classroom. I can't say that that's true for everybody's experience. Everybody has different experiences. I was just very lucky that way. And I worked with colleagues that were amazing. I continued to be surrounded by people who were amazing. If you can do that, that's awesome.
Yeah, it definitely sounds awesome. And it sounds like every single piece of the puzzle is just leading you on this journey. And you can see how it's all deeply connected, but they are independent in some ways, but you're drawing from all the experiences that you've had. I imagine you draw from, you talked about your grandparents and a farm. You brought that into one of the core pieces into the classroom of getting people reconnected to food. It strikes me a little bit that it takes often till grade 10 to have that.
Or longer.
Yeah. It was for me grade 11. When it was the first time I had a teacher take it on himself to expose us to some of the environmental issues, and one of which was factory farming. And up until that point, I had no idea, never really thought about it. And yeah, it's striking. I don't want to miss you. You started to talk about Howl. Do you want to just give like a quick overview of what is Howl? Like what is the offering and what's the vision?
Well, you got firsthand. You'd had a Howl experience yourself.
I did.
As I was finishing up my high school career, I managed to take a few more groups up to the Yukon. So I ended up taking 4 different groups up to the Yukon through the Calgary Board of Education. And as I was doing this, one of the gentlemen that I got to work with through my career as I was developing this national science program was Adam Robb. He was running a program similarly with different goals at a different school at Central Memorial. And we'd had multiple conversations at different times. And really, it was at that time, so it would have been 2015 or 2013, there's a real push to try to figure out how to change environmental education within the high school setting to make it more land-based, makes it more experiential, and to really set that hook in that the world's an important place. The earth is an important place. These ecosystems are not just things. And there was a real movement to see if we could push the dial on environmental education beyond kind of just this thing that was encapsulated. This was environmental education because we saw that there were so many things that weren't in that model. And it really led in Calgary, and I saw this a lot, to a resurgence. And you could see that resurgence in programs that were sprouting up, like these unique programs at Robert Thirsk and Central Memorial, and now there are more of them. And I found one cast of characters. So these people that were willing to invest time because they found that this was important. It was a turning point. And part of what I do and who I am now is because of those people I met. So Adam, running his program, as I was starting to continue my program and run trips to Yukon, had a vision of creating a program for a specific group of people who were coming out of high school and were at that point in their lives, and they still didn't know necessarily what they wanted to be. They didn't know what their why was. We talked about this earlier this morning. He wanted to be able to create maybe a program. He heard about programs over in Europe that were doing these. They were gap year programs, opportunities for young adults to have an experience that maybe shone a light and helped them find some passions or some pathways that they didn't find in the high school setting. We had conversations as he was envisioning this, and he decided to take the chance. And he's now created an organization called the Howell Experience. And it started as experiences for gap year students, for students that had graduated, to come to the Rocky Mountains and have an experience and work with the community and live in the area and work with elders and experience that alpine setting to see if there was something there that could go, oh, I didn't know that this was in my wheelhouse, to challenge people, to give them experiences they wouldn't normally have. And he left his program behind, gave it to somebody else, and took the chance and started this program. So he was doing this and I was still teaching at Thirsk. We had some conversation. He says, this Yukon thing, he says, you're doing it for high school students. Do you think we would be willing to take some of that expertise and run some summer programs for us? And I'm like, yeah, I could go back to the Yukon again and run some summer programs. So over a 3-year period, I ran summer programming. So the program that you were exposed to is called a Howell Exploration, which is an 8-day experience for 18 to 35-year-olds to come up to the north, to work with some elders, to see some new terrain, but really based on 4 pillars that I used in high school. So the 4 pillars that have become part of the programming that we use in Howell for some of our programming is climate action and climate change. So recognizing that you need to understand some of the science that is driving our world and is creating change so that you can enter the conversation. Indigenous education, so working with elders and wisdom keepers in the land that is traditional to them, and bringing in that opportunity for two-eyed seeing. Outdoor adventure. We need to offer challenge. We need to show you that you are welcome and willing to take some steps to challenge yourself, maybe outside the physical, emotional, or social boundaries that you have in yourself. So climbing a mountain, doing some of the hikes that we do, really can be quite challenging. For some people, it's the first time they've done a 10-kilometer hike. That's a challenge. And the challenge by itself is not just physical. It's the conversations that happen on that trail. For some people, it's the first hike they've ever taken. How do you take somebody on a 10-kilometer hike that's never hiked before? That's a conversation that happens along the trail. And it's incredible when people come back going, I never thought I could do that. Well, there's a challenge. You met the challenge. And sometimes that challenge doesn't go all the way to the end. So I've had groups that can't make 10 kilometers, but they can make 5. We celebrate as much on a 5K as we do on a 10K, right? But we work as a group to meet those challenges. And then we've built in what we call that community and volunteer aspect of our program. So we don't want to just be those groups that go into an area and visit and then leave. Mm-hmm. We want to always make sure that where we have an opportunity to give back, we do. So we now do community and volunteer work in as many communities on every program as we can. So do you do any volunteer work on yours?
I was just trying to think about that. I think there was supposed to be a day and there was weather or something.
The weather, and it can change. So we've built it in where we try to plan it in, but I've had many programs that I've run where I get a phone call from an elder that goes, we could actually use help with. And we go, great, we're just going to move the hike to here. We're going to open up this and we will be there at this particular time. So we did some work on some community gardens in Burwash Landing for Kluane First Nation. They had a hard time getting people to come and help them get the gardens ready for the season. We came out for 2 hours with 20 people, got their gardens set, and they were ready to be planted by the time we left. That took us 2 hours, and it was an easy way for us to give back. They now know that if something comes up, I've got 20 sets of hands. Again, I think that's huge when you talk about community building. Mm-hmm. And community building in any of these programs, whether it's a group of high school students or whether it's a group of young adults that are 18 to 35, we were talking about community early, and sometimes we rely on community through our technology. This is an opportunity to put that technology away and build community as human beings in a place that you've never experienced with, on your program, a group of people you didn't know. You met those people and worked with a group of strangers in 8 days. How much community did you build with that group of strangers?
I pursued a master's because of the community.
Okay. Right? And some of those people have now become lifelong friends.
Absolutely.
We have friendships that are built and this will never end. That's what we're driving at. And if you can do that in a land-based setting, with these experiences that you're having, I think just the power of that, I just, so with Adam, he was like, could you do this in the summer? And we built this. And then as I got closer to retiring, he said, do you think that you would be willing to come to work for Howell and build the high school end of things? So now with Howell, I'm now working in their Yukon portfolio. I'm the program manager for Yukon. We have a program manager for the Maritimes. We have a program manager for the Rockies. And we're looking at a program manager for British Columbia and the coast, is because each one of these areas offers unique experiences in settings that they're not comparable.
Yeah.
They just offer such different things with a cast of characters who are able to storytell. I think the power of story is incredible. The people you bring forward. So some of the people that we have, like, did you have Parks come out?
Yep.
So you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
What an incredible storyteller.
Absolutely.
And the ability, like Jamie, like
It wasn't Jamie.
Who-
It was female.
oh, Aaron.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
She brought a puppet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So just the ability to tell stories in a different manner around a fire. And then that whole conversation quite often led to that co-management conversation.
Yeah.
So the fact that, you know, Parks Canada and Indigenous communities in the North are working differently together, and that's the key. They're beginning to work together on these land projects. It's just so powerful to hear. It's just so powerful to hear those stories, and suddenly people are like, oh, we weren't having these conversations at home. And then what do you do with the things that you've learned there, and then you take home with you?
Yeah.
Does it open up a new conversation? And I quite often find people are like the conversation I had with my friends when I got home. Those weren't conversations that I was having before I left. Those are great because it just means that you're opening up new pathways and new ways of taking that learning and making it practical for you wherever you are. And we work with young adults and students, hopefully from across the country. And again, pointing north, it's a little bit off the beaten path. So, you know, the Howell experience has been able to take some of these things that we've seen and the power of these, build them using those 4 pillars, and offer unique experiences for either high school students or young adults. And I'm lucky, I get to also run educator PDs. So now I get to work with teachers and educators from across the country and expose them to these, with the hope being that maybe they bring back, you know, a classroom themselves. I'm hoping to bring more high school groups from across the country up there. Or educators that are just looking for, much like me, looking for an experience that opens their eyes and gives them a new perspective.
Yeah.
The conversations around the fire with 20 educators, okay, I mean,
Valuable.
high school kids, totally different conversation. Group of young adults, totally different. You put a group of educators around a fire, holy cow.
Yeah.
Then fireside conversations. We were talking about, I said, COVID opened up that desire to find natural spaces. We, through that COVID period as educators, we ran fireside conversations online just so that we could get a group of educators to continue to see the value of what we do, despite the fact that we weren't in our classrooms.
Yeah.
We would have these firesides, these 3-hour conversations online about what we could be doing or what we want to be doing or what we are going to doing. And those conversations continue now. And I think the power of environmental education is growing outside that box.
Yeah.
That box that used to be environmental education that I thought sometimes was there needs to be more there, has grown in so many different areas and has brought in such a huge cast of characters. And again, you saw the cast of characters that you got to work with in the Yukon. Those conversations are just, and they're never the same. I've now run 15, close to 20 different programs in the Yukon now. And none of the conversations on those programs are the same because we're not scripting it.
Not scripting it, and I think everybody has a part to play. And I love this idea of like you're shaping a memory, and particularly in an experience like that, everybody is shaping the memory collectively. And the fears that, you know, one person might be going through in that particular moment where you're not afraid, maybe you have something to draw from your childhood and vice versa. And like, it's very reciprocal. There's a dance to this group dynamic of a group of people going into an area that they've otherwise never been. and they don't know each other. And so you're playing off of learning from one another, but also playing off of being exposed to that unknown. And it really makes me wonder, one of the thoughts that came from that Howell experience was with, is it Pauline? Polly?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Polly, when she was talking about Silver City.
Mm.
And she was saying how people came to Silver City with this idea that there was silver, but it was the silver fox that was being farmed. But you would have people arrive in Whitehorse and set off on this massive expedition through the mountains, spending 3 weeks or whatever it took to get to this area. And that would be part of the human experience within that landscape. And I've wondered if that's the piece that's missing, is that our collective ancestors would have done these experiences where it would have just been interacting with the world around us, but it's deep transformative experience. That idea of building those memories with one another. Whoever's on that trip, you would have to rely on, and you have to help them overcome the fears. They have to help you overcome your fears. How do you feel like we can get back to that place collectively? Like when you think about childhood and human development, it seems like this idea of exposing you into the unknown and these transformative experiences is a common thread in all of it. And I can draw parallels to rites of passages. I can draw parallels to these expeditions that people would have done just to survive. And I feel like it's deeply human.
Well, when you look at Polly, a lot of that came back to that one of those pillars we talked about with that Indigenous kind of education is that concept of reconciliation. Is we have to be open to looking at our past. So what Polly was doing there was getting you to look at our past and how, changes to that past that's led to our present. So the building of the Alaskan Highway, the coming of people there during colonialism to find gold and other resources, how that changes and impacts a community. But at the same time, if you can bring to bear the changes that have occurred and the things that need to be dealt with through reconciliation, leading to what some people are calling reconciliation now.
Okay.
You have to be willing to open up your mindset to take that historical look at things, make a decision as to how you stand with that, and then figure out how you can move forward with the communities in those areas. So, and that doesn't have to be just the Yukon. That can be the community here in Calgary.
Yeah.
Is how do we move the dial and push that forward so that collectively we're understanding how important it is. Like that two-eyed seeing that we talked about. I mean, for me in the science classroom, I taught about the Gaia hypothesis. So trying to consider the earth to be a living, breathing thing. That can be a very difficult concept, but scientifically you can point to a lot of different aspects that makes that true. And I always would start with that principle in terms of, if you consider the earth to be a breathing, living thing, why would you do the things to it that you're currently are doing in some aspects? I mean, and not everything that we do is bad. Some of the things we do is really good. Now take that into a two-eyed seeing version and take that same principle and work with an elder. And that makes that other bridging. So now you've got this one scientific thing, say, okay, I get how the earth works, but I've just heard from an elder how they look at the living world and in all of its aspects. And they're not stories that I share because they're not for me to share. They're for them to share.
Yeah.
But when you blend those together, you get a bigger perspective that's suddenly more than just you. And you go, okay, I can't do something about everything, but I can do something about this. So we were talking just even choices about what we choose to eat and how we source the food that we eat and those kind of things. Those are a great conversation to have. They're not an easy conversation to have. And sometimes these conversations you have on the land are not easy. I distinctly remember having conversations where you can see people feel guilt. Okay, that's okay. Like there's a certain amount of guilt that we all have and we all carry because of the things that we do. How do we process that? How do we change that into something where we're more content with the choices that we're making based on the things that we know about the land? That's not an easy thing. You live in a big city. Sometimes that's a hard thing to talk about at all. I mean, sometimes what's the land that you have a conversation with? You might live downtown and you touch concrete all day.
Yeah.
But there's also the river basin that you can visit and have that walk, have that moment where you can make that reconnection. I think it's very different. And again, it's not prescriptive. And that's the thing that I'm learning, is that these conversations can happen if you allow yourself to have them in very different places. They're not all going to be pain-free. Like sometimes you're going to have to go, okay, that is not the way that I was thinking about this to start with, but it opens up an invitation to start thinking about it in a different manner. And it might lead to change. It might not lead to change. I mean, and this is the thing, you have to be willing to know that not everything that you have a conversation with is going to be earth-shattering and is going to change your life and is going to shift that direction. But like I said earlier, sometimes it sets a hook.
Yeah.
And sometimes that conversation that you had 10 years ago comes to fore. Oh, I remember that conversation that we had with Polly in Silver City, and we were talking about the impacts on community. And I remember her saying, you know, one of the reasons that they selected Soldier Summit for cutting the tape and opening up the Alaskan Highway was simply because when people ask, where should we celebrate the opening of this highway that we've endeavored and put together in record time, people constantly came back to the beauty of Kluane. Every soldier said the beauty of Kluane Lake. We can't think of a better place to do this. Well, what a mix! You've just blasted this highway through this beautiful landscape. Okay, that's industrialization and modernization, and you've made some irrevocable changes to the communities and the cultures that are there, and that's an entirely different story. But the fact that they wanted to celebrate that because of the beauty of the place,
Yeah.
when you really think about that, there was a connection made there with a group of people who were visiting that space, and it became a place for them historically.
Yeah.
We always have that conversation on Soldier Summit. It's one of those things, and Polly brings it up, and it does allow you to go, okay, so this is my history, this is our present, and then well, where do we want to go with that now?
Yeah.
And that allows you to envision what that potential future could be. Right?
Super interesting. I think it's like you speak to so many pieces that even in my own environmental journey, what I thought was clean isn't clean. And I thought, you know, when I decided I wasn't going to support factory farming, I went and got myself a gun. I thought, once you have a gun, it's clean, you take a shot, you harvest an animal, and at the very least, I would know where our food's coming from. And what I have learned since then is that the killing of an animal isn't a clean process. The harvesting of an animal isn't clean. These parts that I feel like we've created, these barriers where it is uncomfortable to step into it. It is uncomfortable to step into reconciliation, to confront these pieces of our collective heritage in Canada and have to grapple with it, contend with it. Particularly, that's one of the pieces that makes the Yukon Howl experience, I think, so impactful, is not only is this part of our history and heritage, it's so recent. When you talk about the Alaska Highway and learning about the Cold War and how it's one lifetime ago.
Yeah.
You know, my grandfather just passed. He was born in 1928. This happened in his lifetime. And it's hard to be able to wrap your head around that. And I think it's what makes these land-based experiences so impactful, in my opinion anyways, is it gives these vessels to contend with things that require the nuance, require processing, require the fire chats, require, you know, community members to tell their story. And I think it's such a gift that you're bringing forward and such a impactful piece. I guess for those that haven't had a land-based experience, I think that term, you and I know what that kind of encapsulates, but I don't feel like that has been facilitated in many people's lives. Like what are some of the pieces when you think about creating an 8-day program, you're going to bring 18 to 35-year-olds into a place? What are some of the pieces that you ensure are part of that experience?
Well, one of the things that I've always known is that one of the things about human beings is our memories are very short. So, and we tend to forget. And we see this all the time. You would think you would learn lessons sometimes and you forget. And then they come back and they go, I knew that. Why didn't I remember that? And because memories are short, one of the things that I've learned is to keep a memory present and keep a memory very viable. It has to be impactful. And sometimes a classroom and a presentation or a textbook or a piece of reading or something can be impactful, and it can come back to you. But we find if you think about the memories that you have, the memories that you have that come to the surface really easily are usually attached to a very strong emotion. Okay, whether that's good or whether that's bad, or those two emotions can really hammer home a memory, and we know that. We want to create experiences where somewhere, hopefully during that period of time, you have an experience that has an emotional impact to it, whether it's somebody that you work with, an experience that you have, that won't just be fleeting. And I think we purposely have tried to do that, not by planning for that. We can't. I can't plan for you to have an emotionally impactful experience, but I can create a journey that allows you the latitude to have those experiences. And I think one of the things we've done is we've tried to create experiences where you see different places, you have the opportunity to spend time in a place. Sometimes we would like, we would like those experiences to happen, but you're not given the time. You go to a place, you have 15 minutes and you have to leave.
Yeah.
We try to make sure that those experiences are, we're going to go to a place, we're going to give some time there for you to see if there's something there for you to encapsulate. Sometimes it's a sidebar conversation around a fire. But we try to put different pieces in play throughout the day that just give you that time to make that connection. And we call it land-based because we're trying to do this outside the prescriptive boundaries of a four-walled classroom. I can take you to the Yukon. I can put you in a classroom and I can teach you about the boreal forest. Mm-hmm. Or I can maybe give you a group of researchers that happen to be there studying the boreal forest, and you get to work with them in the forest. That's two different experiences. So land-based is all about trying to get you into that place in which you're trying to learn. Mm-hmm. And it's not easy. I mean, we talk about land-based education in the city of Calgary. Well, sometimes that can be as simple as going out into your playground out back. Sometimes it's taking that 15-minute walk to a wetland system. And sometimes that walk to the wetland system is not sitting down learning about the wetland system. Sometimes that's 15 minutes just to sit by that wetland system and enjoy what it is. I don't have to stand up and talk to you for 15 minutes. So my job is not to stand up in a boreal forest and tell you about the boreal forest. My job is to throw a couple of nuggets here and there and show you what the boreal forest can be. For everybody, that's going to be a very different experience. I think that's the power of what Howl does, is we have a cast of characters that love being on the land and have a series of stories that we can share. But we also understand sometimes it's not what we have to share. Sometimes it's us just taking you into that area, giving you a half an hour. Like, I love the concept. I went back to this book by John Young earlier, the Coyote's Guide. One of the biggest things in there that I picked up were two concepts. One was the idea of sit spot, which we do in elementary school all the time. I love doing sit spot with adults and young adults. And sometimes it's the first time that they've done it. Sometimes they've done this. They've been exposed to it. But sit spot is just looking for a place on the land for you to go and spend some time with. And sometimes that involves maybe some journaling. Sometimes that involves just simply being quiet. Sometimes that's just picking things up in that environment and just looking at the things that are malleable in that context. And then you match it with another concept in there of wandering, which is really bizarre in high school, when you tell a group of high school students or young adults just to wander. Take a wander. See what's around. And when you watch, as an educator viewpoint, and you watch, it's interesting that you can look at how people wander on the land and what they're drawn to. There's a reason they're drawn to that. I don't necessarily have an explanation to why they were drawn to that particular place, but when you watch, whatever draws a person to that particular place of the landscape as they wander is important to them in some way that they may not know at that particular time, but will become known to them later. When? I don't know, right? But these are, we're not like going from A to B. I will always say that we have this really bad habit. And I see this on hikes all the time, is we start at A because we want to get to B. And I go, that's not actually the important thing. I said, if you can't tell me 20 things that you saw between A to B, you weren't actually immersing yourself in that environment. You were too worried about getting to B because you need to take a picture there and then you need to leave.
Yeah.
I'm not about getting there to take a picture. I'm about wandering that A to B and having a look and enjoying things. Like, it's amazing how I can take a group of students on a hike and then come back on that same trail and I go, I'm going to stop here now and I want you to notice something. And they look around and they go, there's a waterfall around here. Yeah, we passed that on the way up.
Yeah.
What made you miss that? We were too busy having our conversations. We were too busy taking pictures. We weren't quiet. And I said, and that's okay. But I said, as I go, I'm going to make sure sometimes I purposely stop there. And then let's go and have a look.
Yeah.
Right. And I might not do that every hike. I might do it in different places. But they're like, you are seeing things so differently. And I said, and my way of seeing is the way that I see things. I always tell people on a trail, when was the last time you looked back? And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, that's because you're focused on there.
Yeah.
I said, just turn around and have a look. And sometimes if you pick a perfect spot, they turn around, they go, holy cow. And I'm like, yeah, that's where you came from. But we're so focused on where we're trying to get to, we forget about where we came from. And especially when you do a hike that's climbing,
yeah,
and they don't recognize how much they've climbed, and then you stop them and you turn them around and they go, oh, we've come up a long ways. Would you have known that if you didn't turn around and have a look?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that looking backward. And I said, you're going to see that coming down, and you'll see it from a different aspect because now it's where you're going. But it's interesting, and this is just that going from A to B. There's not a hike that I've ever done or that has been the same for every group. I don't do a prescribed hike where I know that I'm going to stop at point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5. Those stops are usually, they're derived by the group that I'm walking with.
Yeah.
And sometimes I hear a piece of conversation. I'm like, that would be I know something up here. We could stop and we can tie that in. I love when people are like, we were just talking about that. And I'm like, well, I'm not ignoring you. I'm out here doing, and then they're like, wow, that's kind of cool. And then if you're lucky and you're working with, I've done some really cool hikes in Kananaskis where I've been able to hike with a wisdom keeper or a local elder. It's amazing when I stop and maybe have a conversation, then the elder steps forward and has a totally different conversation about the same thing. Or where that elder steps in and has a conversation, then I'm able to pipe in with something that adds into that conversation, right? I've had some amazing hikes where I have learned. I was like, that's new to me.
Yeah.
And when the kid stands and goes, really? I'm like, yeah, I'm still learning. I have lots to learn, right? I think that's the power of Howl, is the cast of characters and their connection, their own connection. Because the people that I work with, they are connected different than I am. And they're all bringing different experiences. And we're able to bring that to bear when we take groups of high school students or young adults or teachers out on the land. I like to think that those adventures are seamless. They don't feel that we have planned for that to happen. Because in a lot of cases, you talked about James Allen, one of the elders we work with in the Yukon. I remember being there on a day where a grizzly mom and her cubs walked out on the ridge across from where we were standing.
Yeah.
And he stopped what he was doing and began to have a conversation with those grizzly bears. And the gist of the conversation is he wanted to thank Mom for coming and showing us her new cubs. He thanked her for sharing it was beautiful, and it was unscripted and it was unplanned. And the kids that we were with were totally gobsmacked. And she just walked across the ridge and disappeared. And James had a conversation and a thank you, and then turned around and had a conversation with us why it's important that, those bears are welcome to that landscape because they too are a part of that landscape and this is where they live and those kind of things. And he was able to tie that moment and then turn that moment and then continued on with the rest of the day.
Yeah.
It was a part of what happened that day. That's the power of land-based learning with the people that you're out with, but the things that are going to happen on that day, that if you're with a cast of characters who are able to respond to that and not turn that into what we would classically call as a teachable moment, which they are, they're turned into memories. So I started this whole conversation with memory, is if we can create an experience that you're allowed to have those emotional attachments to a particular, and it could be, like I say, it could be a sit spot. I know lots of people who they know specifically that the moment that something changed just a little bit was that 15 minutes that they spent on the beach at Kluane Lake, or that 15 minutes that they spent at the 2K marker on Sheep Creek Trail, or that moment that they breached the top of King's Throne and turned around and saw where they had come from and what they were exposed to. There are lots of people that will say that that was the moment that something changed.
Yeah.
What that something is would vary from person to person. But I think that's the power of Howl. And it's one of the reasons why I retired. I took 2 days off in retirement, and now I work full time for them, is just the fact that they've given me a little bit of latitude to offer these experiences to people. And I'm able to create these experiences, or not these experiences, I'm able to create these journeys and then share what I know, and then allow other people to share what they know. And then the people, the cast of characters they're exposed to. That's a pretty good retirement.
Yeah, it is.
Like, and for me, that's another journey. And like I say, I'm very lucky. I'm supported by, like, I have an amazing family. I mean, my wife and my 2 daughters I'm allowed to share this with them. And they're like, Dad gets to go to the Yukon. I'm very lucky in that way. I'm supported in that way. And then the people I work with on a daily basis. I mean, we're on our 2-week holiday right now, but I'll go back to the office the following Monday, and the people I get to work with and share with, and we get to create that creativity and that imagination and that problem solving aspect. I couldn't ask to be working. I mean, I've always been blessed with colleagues that I've worked with. My entire educational career, I have worked with freaking amazing people. I get to do that now. Still, I'm very lucky in that aspect.
It sounds it. It sounds like you found people that are willing to step outside of the confines of norms. Like, even when you talk about Howl, one thing that comes to mind is an excerpt from Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about the concept of time and how it's such a Western perspective. And when you talk about the lands giving you these experiences, it's challenging.
You experienced Yukon time.
Absolutely. And you're beholden to, if the sunset that day is vivid and beautiful and awe-inspiring, spend time with it. Don't have this idea of this structured, I need to be somewhere. Mm-hmm. But I think that piece makes people uncomfortable, even for myself. Like, I love exploring the outdoors, but I always feel like I have a destination. I always have this goal. Mm-hmm. And in hearing your perspective and insights, I think I can do a better job at just being and slowing down and being okay with, if there's something, you don't have to be on a trail run just because you concocted this idea in the morning that I'm going out there for a run. And so if the land dictates this invitation, hear it, like, have that relationship with it. I guess one final question on that note is, if there was one practice or piece of advice or habit that you could instill in everybody for them to just have a deeper relationship with the land that they exist within, what do you think you would advise?
Again, going back to not the expert and don't know everything. My wife would laugh at this because she knows that I'm a hamster wheel. My head's always going here, and sometimes I have real difficulties in slowing down and which sounds, after everything we've just talked about, you would be like, well, this dude must just sit and slow down all the time.
Meditate.
I don't, that's not how I'm wired. And again, I'm on a journey now myself, because I've come out of a classroom after 30 years where there are a lot of routines and you're always planning, and well, every teacher would know that there's no lesson plan that survives a group of students ever. Your day is not going to go the way that you had it planned. And I've come from that to now living where I'm not in a classroom. Like, I'm not planning every day, but my head, constant hamster wheel. And I know so many people out there, it's a constant, I gotta. Our world is very much wired to that. You got to do this. You got to get that done. This needs to be attended to. I would say the biggest thing that I am trying to learn how to do is to find that ability on a daily basis, not weekly and not monthly, of trying to figure out how to slow that down. I'm still learning. In an urban setting, I find that not as easy. I think the one of the things that I'm thinking it will help as I live next to an environmental park is simply a walk. And I know a lot of people that walking aspect of things. When I'm on a trip, for sure, when I'm in the Yukon and I'm on a trip, is finding that 15 minutes where you can be where you need to be. And for me, that could be the 15 minutes when I wake up in the morning and I sit on the deck, or that 15 minutes of, like, if you were on the trip with me, you would have known that I was the first person up probably on the station. And I would quite often be the person that would put that first coffee together, and I would sit on that coffee and I would simply sit on that deck and I would simply just look out over Kluane and Sheep Mountain.
Yeah.
You know that view. That to me was easy there.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many places that I visit there, or in Bamfield. I talked about that bench that I'd sat and read a book on. I can think of places away where I know, because I'm away purposefully, I'm going to take that time. Here, now, that's tricky. That's the process. That's still a journey for me. I'd say my wife would laugh at this because she knows the hamster wheel. For me to say 15 minutes to find that space, she would look at me and go, "What did you do that yesterday?" Right? She would turn that on me, and she would know that, well, you say that, and I do, and it works brilliantly when I'm away. I find it really hard to find that now.
Yeah.
I'm working on it. I would say that that place where I got away today was on my Peloton. The hamster wheel shut off.
Yeah.
It's one place. I would challenge people to figure out what that place was.
That intentional time
where you shut off.
Yeah.
I said this morning that one of the things is every one of us needs to have a cool down period during the day.
Mm-hmm.
Now that cool down period is that point of time where we need to be able to from what's been going on that day, and cool down allows us to find that center.
Yeah.
That's a challenge. So like I say, I don't necessarily have an answer. I would like to say that today I went out for a 15-minute sit spot in Nose Hill Park.
Yeah.
If I could do that every day, maybe I should do that every day. That would be perfect. I know 20 places that I could sit in Nose Hill Park for 15 minutes, sit spot. And, you know, I told people, sometimes people sit spot and they need to journal. If that's you and that's how you awesome.
Yeah.
If it's you just need to sit there and breathe for 15 minutes, that's also awesome. I said some people, they still can't quite get that. They need to be busy. I told people in a sit spot this summer that one of the things is I teach people sit spot in 4 ways. Pick a spot that calls to you. When you get there, look at your feet. What is around you? Why is it that you picked that space? I said, then once you're comfortable, look just kind of around you, not at a distance, because the first thing that we're all notorious for is doing the distance. We've picked a place and now it's that we need to focus on, but we don't look at just kind of in this area. And then I said, third is not to go to the distance, because again, we want to go to the distance right away as we look up. We quite often forget that sky that's above us. We've looked at where we put our feet. We're looking at the sky that's above us. We're looking at that space that surrounds us. And then finally do that distance piece. Sometimes that allows people to get off that hamster wheel because they still have to have that purpose. They still have to be doing, right? They can't just sit, breathe, and relax. That doesn't. So there's so many ways of doing it.
Yeah.
Right. But making it purposeful and making sure that we have that time, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
Right. And like I say, it's easy when I'm away. It's more difficult when I'm not sure. When I was teaching for 30 years, I'm sure there was a space there that I could. Sometimes it was the kids left and I would just sit at the desk for 15 minutes and go, okay,
yeah,
that's process. Some of it, my wife would say, would be the drives. I used to commute between Calgary and Canmore. Calgary to Canmore to teach was me lesson planning. Canmore back to Calgary was me unloading and processing what just happened. And I know there were days where I don't remember anything between Canmore and Calgary.
Yeah.
Because I was just, very different for everybody. And I think it's lifelong. I think what works now might not work 5 years from now. You might have to tinker and you modify. And this is one of the things that the people I work with are really good at being able to take a situation that has gone this way and move it in a different direction.
Yeah.
And in a direction where you don't even know that we moved that direction. We just altered that story, and that power of story. I mean, everybody have to be able to listen to those stories that people tell you, because maybe when you listen better and you listen to those stories, it will give you that kernel that will allow you to go, oh, that might be worth me taking 15 minutes and giving that a go.
Yeah. But also, I think it comes in those 15 minutes, that those kernels that exist all around you in these conversations and moments of time.
Yeah.
It's funny because even hearing you talk about it, I'm like, yeah, it's 15 minutes. Like, why wouldn't you make time for this? But we all create this negotiation in our mind of why today's not the day, or, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It just can't make the time. But there's a processing piece in the stillness, but there's also that discomfort in the stillness. And I think everybody contends with it. And you do, even the way that you talked about it, where you were saying, you have to grapple with those feelings of, I need to be doing something, but you are doing the thing that you should be doing in sitting still. But in your mind, you're constantly fighting this battle of, I should be thinking about this more, or I should be processing this. And it's really, just having that like humility to just be and allow the kernel to come to your consciousness in that moment in time. So
and that reconnection, and that it doesn't end your journey.
Yeah.
Like, reconnection doesn't mean it's, I've reconnected, I'm done. Ta-da, we reached the end of that path.
Yeah.
Well, the only people that see the end of the paths are humans.
Totally.
There's no end to that path.
Yeah.
Like, where's the next branch? Where's the next word? Oh, there was a path back there. I need to go there now and check that out. It's yeah. And I mean, conversations. I remember some people, you take them up to a place that's isolated like Yukon and take them to a hike and then just go, everybody just be quiet. And they're like, holy crap. Quiet. Like, some people, their search is just for that kernel of quiet.
Yeah.
Our modern world doesn't lend itself to quiet.
No.
There's usually always something going on in the background. You take them to a place where it's quiet, that's creepy to some people, because they've never experienced quiet, and they recognize that for the first time. And then they go, do I need that?
Yeah.
Do I need quiet? How do I get quiet? Right? Because sometimes that's something that we need, but we don't recognize that, because if you're constantly stimulated, because there's always some noise or something going on, that's a lot. Yeah. That's a lot to process. That downtime sometimes is that urge to find that quiet place. And that quiet place means different things to different people.
Yeah.
Right. And again, sometimes I've learned that from some of the groups that are like, there's, I've never, and I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. Because I've never, and then they're like, maybe I need.
Totally.
Maybe I can build. Right. Again, I love the fact that with Howl, we've called many of our programs journeys. And then the program that you participate in was an exploration.
Yeah.
Right? Those terms are not used without purpose. So they're thoughtful in terms of what we are trying to offer, but what we're not trying to prescriptively plan.
Yeah.
Right? We want these to be going back to those memories. I mean, you know exactly, you can, like, if I was asked you to share a memory from your trip to the Yukon, you could go there right away.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not because it was only a year ago. That's because you've imbued it with some form of meaning.
Yeah.
And that meaning was important to you at that particular moment. For every person that takes a journey like this, whether it be with Howl or whether it would be with other groups or just taking a journey yourself, those memories will be impactful for a reason. And it won't be short term. It won't be something that you'll forget. It's not what we're after, but what we're hoping is that there's memories derived on these programs, these journeys, that give you a memory that will, I've connected in a way that I hadn't before, right? And it allows you really, we were talking earlier about the difference between a connection and a relationship, because the connection is that first step in entering that conversation in a land-based setting, and then building that into a relationship that becomes more encompassing in your life. it's not just that one-time experience. It now becomes, oh, I can do that and build something with it. So that difference, and this again was a piece of knowledge that I was gifted by an elder, was that difference really between what a connection and a relationship. Like I was that participant, that difference between a space and a place. It's changed how I look at things and how I use some of the knowledge I have in a setting like the Yukon.
Yeah. What, just to wrap up, how are people to get involved in Howl? If they wanted to have one of these.
Oh, Adam would love this. Adam would say thank you for this. Yeah, for sure. Website for sure.
Okay.
It's called the Howl Experience. You'll find it to be the first thing that comes up. Howl like the wolf. Website is there. Lots of different experiences for, like I say, high school, for young adults, kind of that 18 to 35 that are looking for an adventure kind of outside of their boundaries. Educators from across the country. We have run educator PDs. The website's set up to just give you a really quick snapshot of what's available.
Okay.
But where there are actual opportunities available, we have dates and times and opportunities to just reach out to us and express your interest. And even if it's just a general question, what is Howl? There's a opportunity just to reach out going, listen, I've heard about this. Somebody will get back to you right away. Again, kind of just that opportunity to peruse what's available on the website and know that if you have questions, that we have a cast of characters that will get back to you almost immediately with, great, you've shown interest in this. Can I answer some questions? But the whole idea is to kind of give a pretty wide range. It started as kind of, like I say, kind of that gap year group, and has now grown to kind of encompass that group of educators that want to have these experiences and either come with a mind to bring group themselves or an opportunity to expand their journey themselves, down to now we're offering some pretty cool opportunities for high school students at a really formative age. Like high school, we talked earlier, some of the experiences that shaped my life were opportunities that happened to me in high school and didn't necessarily set the direction, but set an opportunity. So yeah, the Howl Experience, if you type that in, experiencehowl.com, howlexperience.com, you'll find it. It's a pretty cool opportunity. And again, you've experienced it yourself. It made some pathway changes for you.
I was just about to say, I think it seemed too good to be true. And I remember going with that perspective in mind of not knowing what I had signed up for and just being blown away. And I think you need a moment in your life to be able to process all the different pieces that led to that moment in time and allow you to make these connections to give you that momentum. And it radically did. And it put me on a path. And so, yeah, couldn't attest more for the work that you guys do. I think it's deeply needed. It's a gift to society. And yeah, I definitely recommend anybody who's looking for a transformative experience or just looking to shake things up to do it. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for
pleasure.
Being a good listener and giving me an audience. And like I say, this stuff it's easy to talk about because it changes all the time. You know, we have this conversation 3 years from now.
Yeah.
We could be talking about slightly different things.
Right? Absolutely. But it's in you. It comes out. This passion burns deep.
Well, and it's always nice to see the impact and the journey that you're on. And like I say, with your podcasting and the journeys that you're taking, to see that was a part of why you're doing it, that's always a pat on the back for some of the things that we do. So thank you.
Thank you.